Well, we talked a little bit about the UTA trade terms, and that is the most important thing. So there's 5 or 6 things that you're going to want to do. These are the conditions that we buy a truck under, and these are the things that will absolutely have the most impact on your resale value. Number 1 is you want to make sure there are no check engine lights or active fault codes. First of all, it could mean there's something seriously wrong with the truck, but the most important reason that you want to take care of that is most transport companies won't even pick up and move a truck if you've got a check engine light or an active fault code on there. So you want to make sure that that dash is not lit up. No fault codes, no check engine lights. The second thing is you want to make sure your tires and brakes are 50% or better, which is the UTA trade terms. But you want to sell a truck that's got some good life left on the tires and the brakes. You want to make sure if there's any major body damage, anything over $250, $500, that you get that addressed. You want to make sure that there's no major fluid leaks on the truck. If you park the truck and you move it an hour later and there's a big puddle on the ground, that's an issue that you need to have addressed. And then you also want to make sure that the truck runs up and down the highway safely and is mechanically sound, which usually if it's got a current DOT sticker on it, that signifies that the truck is safe and sound to operate. Paperwork is a big part of it. So that's typically, if we have a hang-up, the bottleneck in the process for us buying trucks usually comes down to the inspection. It's a lot of times it's tough to get a third-party inspector out there in 24, 48 hours. So sometimes that'll bottleneck us 3 to 5 days, or the paperwork. But believe it or not, probably half the time, if there's a holdup in the sale of a truck, it's around the paperwork. Either there's a lien on the title that hasn't been released, and we've got to go through the financing company or the bank, and they've got a policy where they take 10 business days to get you a lien release, or possibly the truck is titled in somebody else's name besides yours, or an old operating authority that you used to operate under. You've got to make sure when you're selling a truck that either there's no lien, that the title's free and clear, and it's either in your name or the name of your operating authority, or if there is a lien on it, you've got to have the proper paperwork that shows that lien has been released or will be released once it's funded. No, it really isn't. There's 2 things that we're going to need if we buy the truck as far as paperwork goes, and actually just one. If there's not a lien on the title, all you really need is the title. That's the only certificate of ownership. If you've got a free and clear title, your name is Bob Jones, you own that truck, that title's in your name. That is the only paperwork that we'll need. But a lot of times there's liens on the title, so you're going to need paperwork from the bank, and then oftentimes these are run under fleets. So I might be working with the guy that owns the company, and his name may be Bob Jones, but the trucks are run under his operating authority, Jones Transit or Jones Trucking Company. So you've got to make sure the paperwork matches up. But typically it's only 2 pieces. We just need the title and we need a lien release if that's applicable. There's 2 sides to that. So mechanically and the specs on the truck, it is pretty important usually if you run a fleet of trucks that they're the same, because it saves you on the cost of maintenance, and also your guys are trained to work on those types of trucks. So if you run a fleet of trucks, let's say you've got 100 of them, and 35 of them have a Caterpillar engine in them, and another 10 have a PACCAR engine in them, and another 5 have a Cummins, and then the remaining 15 have a Detroit. That means you're going to have the mechanics that are qualified to work on all those, and even if they're qualified to work on them, it's going to be a different setup. Let's say they're running oil changes through, there's going to be a different setup for each one of the trucks. So it does make a big difference. Most fleets typically run the same kind of spec, or at least stick to 2 or 3 main types of specs that they run. If you've got a trucking company that runs Cummins, they'll usually be a Cummins shop, and they'll try to run Cummins in all their engines. But not necessarily. If it's a big enough fleet, they may run 2 types of engines. But as far as like the color of the truck, that's really just personal preference. A lot of these guys that do own fleets are pretty big on that. They've got a real look to which they consider branding on the highway and free advertising. So they'll run red trucks with a real specific paint scheme on them, and they want to make sure that everything in the fleet matches that. But as far as cost of ownership or resale value, it doesn't really affect that. Most of the time that just comes in on the personal preference of the fleet owner.